Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock exactly. We may have a few more that log on here shortly, hopefully, but I want to go ahead and get started because we got quite a bit to get covered in this hour on the new updates for 1220. My name is Jane Buryanik with ThinkWare, and during this webinar, we're going to be going over some of the new features in 1220. The biggest component of that is going to be the 1094C and the 1095C for year-end reporting. Currently, I have everyone on mute. We will not probably have time for questions because we do have so much to get covered in this hour. But if any of you do have questions from this webinar, please send them to productmanagement@thinkwareinc.com, and I get those emails, and I will make sure that we get answers for you and get those answers to you. The three main things we're going to go over today are, of course, the 1094 and 1095C ACA reporting for year end. We will also be going over SUTA effective dates, which is new to 1220. And then we have a navigation update for the go-to button in 1220 that we'll be showing you here shortly as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We'll start with that navigation update. Because our go-to button has been getting so lengthy, we have now combined these into subsets starting in 1220. So if you go to the go-to button, you're going to have 5 subsets here, and under those you will have various buttons. We did not take anything off the go-to button. Basically what we did was just combine them into these groupings. The documentation that's out on the website, there is one document in particular for this that lists what exactly shows up under each of these groupings, and you can certainly use that until you get the feel for where things are at and which group they're included in. So you will notice that on the client, and you will also notice that on the employee maintenance. So I just wanted to show you that because as I go through this webinar and start going to different places for ACA and SUTA, you'll see that the screens are going to look a little different from what you're used to. So that is the first thing that's in 1220 that I wanted to bring up. The next thing is the 1094 and 1095C reporting for year end. We have included in Darwin 1220 the ability to produce forms for this year end for the 1094C and the 1095C. We did not include any forms for the 1094B or the 1095B, which most clients, if they have self-insured, they may be using those. But we did not include those self-insured forms. Also, on the 1095C, there is a section of that, which I believe is Part 3, that does not need to be completed if you are not a self-insured. So that portion will not be completed on our 1095C. And we'll look at that when we get into actually looking at the forms themselves. So we have included the ability to produce those forms. We have also included some setup that you will need for those clients that are ALEs that you need to produce the forms for. And we've also given you the functionality to collect the data that needs to go into those forms. And basically there's 3 different methods that we're using for that data collection. We provide a utility. We also have it in the pay run, the ability to produce the data for that, or you can simply go out and manually update if you so desire. And we'll get into those methods after we talk about the setup of the 1094 and 1095C. So as with our ACA look back and affordability reporting, we have some setup to do for this at the company, the client, and then, of course, at the employee. This is tied into the windows that we had previously created for the look back and affordability. We've just expanded on those windows. So you will notice that they look fairly familiar if you're using that function in Darwin. We're not going to get into any of the look back or affordability functionality or any of those sections of the window. We're simply going to look at the 1094 and 1095C. So the first level we're going to go to is the company level. So at the company level, if you go to Tools, Tools, Setup, Company, you will recall we had the ACA setup window. So if you click on that, you will see the ACA setup for the company level, which is very similar to what it was, except that we've added a couple buttons. The one thing I do want to note on this, for the 1094C and 1095C, your part-time, full-time hours per month will be used in either the utility or the pay run in order to determine whether an employee is part-time or full-time for that month. So I believe it's 130, and this one I have 120. But anyone over those hours per month will be identified as full-time for the 1094, 1095 reporting. Anyone under would be considered part-time. So keep that in mind when you go to do your setup, that you want to make sure and see what number you have there, or if you've not been using it, you want to make sure to populate that. The buttons that we've added are the 1094 ALE group setup and the 1095 pay code selection. The 1094 ALE group setup is basically what you would use if you have clients that are going to be an aggregated group. If they are an aggregated group, you can report them together with one 1094C with authoritative transmittal, and you can assign certain clients to this aggregated group depending on if they're part of like a control group, something of that nature. So what you need to do here is simply set up your group and then include the clients that are going to be part of that group. So you can call the group whatever you would like to call it. Let me go back and create a new one here. So it'll ask you to create one. You can call it what you like. The one thing you do need to do is after you have the ALE group in the description, click Save. Okay, this will allow you to go out and go to your lookup and pick what clients you want to be part of the ACA group. So I'm going to this one, or I'm sorry, part of the aggregated group. Now, if they're already part of another one, you will get a message that comes up and tells you this. So then you'll want to go back out. Since they're already part of a group, you either need to take them out of that group if they're in there by mistake, or don't put them in the new group. So we'll select a couple clients here to put in this group. Okay, and as you will see, once I put them in the group, this 1094 filer box appears. And what that is where you're going to mark which client is going to be the authoritative transmittal for this aggregated group. So if you wanted WC7 to be the authoritative transmittal, you would go ahead and mark that on this and then save it, and then that client is going to be the authoritative transmittal for the JB test aggregated group. Also on the company level is the ability to select pay codes. Now we've given you this ability at the client level and at the company level. These are pay codes that you're going to be selecting that are going to be used to determine which hours you're bringing in for determining part-time and full-time. You can set this up at the company level, or you can, I'll show you in a few minutes where you can set it up at the client level. If you have specifics for a client that you want to keep those separate, you can set that up at the client level. The system will look first at the client level. If nothing is set up there, then it will look to the company level. And you can have whatever codes you want in the selected file. Those will be the pay codes that the system will look at in determining hours for part-time and full-time. If you add a new pay code to Darwin, it will appear out here in the available column, and you will have to manually come out here and select that into your selection column for the ACA reporting. So just keep that in mind. If you add pay codes, it does not automatically bring them over to the selected. It will put them in available column, but you will have to move them over. Excuse me. Okay, so that's really all that gets set up at the company level here for the ACA setup. One other thing you're going to have to do at the company level is to go out to set up or select one of your benefits that you have set up. The reason for this is because the ACA is requiring things monthly. We have to have a way for the system to identify if an employee was enrolled for a month or not. So what we've done is we've gone out, and if you look at a benefit setup, we have added a checkbox here called ACA Benefit. So you can go out to any of your benefits that you have set up, and this is just on the benefit side. You can go out to any of your codes that you have set up for benefits, and you can select that ACA benefit. What the system is going to do is, in the process for collecting data for the 1095, either via the utility or in the pay run, the system is going to look and see, when it calculates that pay or that employee, to see what they have for benefit codes. And if that benefit code has this ACA benefit checked at the company level, then that benefit will be considered enrolled, and that employee will get the proper code for being enrolled. You can go ahead and, if you have existing codes, you can mark that on existing codes. You can mark it on new codes. One thing to keep in mind, you do not need to roll it down. This checkbox is not available on the employee card. It is only at the main setup for the benefit. And that is because the system, when it goes through that process, is looking for any codes that have the ACA benefit. And if the employee has this benefit code, and this is checked at the company level, the employee will be marked as being enrolled for that month. So something to keep in mind, you don't need to roll it down, but you do need to come out here and mark it. And like I said, you can go out and mark it for an existing plan if you have an existing plan or a new plan, but it will only need to be marked on the benefit side. Okay, so that's it at the company level. We've set up what we need to for the ACA at the company level. Now we need to go out and determine and find those ALE clients and get them set up. So I'm going to go out here and select my client. I know they're an ALE client. So I'm going to come out here and go to the ACA setup. Again, we're going to the same window that we had prior to for the look back and the report, our affordable reporting, but we have added and expanded to this window at the bottom a checkbox for ALE. If an employee or if a client needs to have a 1094, 1095 produced, they have got to have the ALE box checked on this window. If they do not have it checked on this window, they will not produce a 1094 or 1095C for employees. If a client is part of an aggregated group, even though they're not the authoritative transmittal, but they're just part of a group, they still have to have the ALE checkbox marked. Okay? Once that checkbox is marked, it will open up the 1094, 1095 setup window. This is a window that is going to populate a section of the 1094C and line 14 and 15 of the 1095. Okay? The 1094C, the certification of eligibility, is something that you're going to have to determine for your client which they would have to be and what would be applicable. This 1094, this portion will show up here on the 1094C. Now this is a different client, but this is where that would populate. So whatever you're checking on the client window here will appear on that line 22. That's the only thing really that at this level we're doing for the 1094C. The 1095C is, and let me bring one of those up. Basically, the 1095C, since we're doing part 1 and part 2 only, part 1 is your basic information, employee and employer. Part 2 is going to be line 14, 15, and 16. And these are the sections, 14 and 15, that we're going to incorporate and populate from this data at the setup level here. Line 16 is the one that will get populated with the data collection from either the utility or the pay run itself. So for line 14 and 15, we're going to look at that. Line 14, we put at the client level. This will default to all employees. And this is the coverage offered code. If you have an employee or group of employees that are a one-off from the rest, you would have to manually go out and change those on the 1095C window for the employee. And I'll show you where that is in a minute here when we get to the employee setup. The line 14, according to the guidelines, if you have code 1B, 1C, 1D, or 1E selected for an employee, they would need to show in line 15 the amount of the lowest cost employee-only premium. If you use any other code, according to the guidelines from line 14, such as 1A, you do not need to populate this line 15. So knowing what you're going to use in line 14 will help with your setup and whether you have to set something up or not. Now, if I have something set up out here, and I do have line 1B, it will not bring it into the form, but it's just causing you extra setup if you don't need it. So you can still have it out there. This line 15 will only affect the 1095C. It will not affect anything with your look-back, affordability, anything like that. So the line 14 codes would be selected here. Line 15 is the employee share setup. So this is where that amount, that dollar amount, if you need that to be populated in line 15, would be the calculation you're going to use. If you have a category rated plan where it's just a certain amount for employee only, then you would put that amount out here under plan amount with the start and end date of that plan. Okay? Those are very easy. If you decide to use an age-banded plan, or if you're using an age-banded plan for this client, you would need to have on this first screen that we went to, this would need to be checked. Even though it's part of the look back piece, we're kind of piggybacking on that with this table for the age band. So you would need to have this checked, and then on this window, your start and end age would open up so you could put your tiers in there. And you would have to have each of your tiers and then the amount that would need to go in that line 15 for the month for that tier. The age-banded calculation method will be available to you if you're using age band. And what this does is basically it's telling you when, if you're jumping to a new tier, when that effect needs to be reported on the 1095. So if I had, say I'm 35 and the next tier is 36, my birthday is today. If I have first of the month marked, the month of November on my 1095 would have the tier up to 35. So if it's 25 to 35 is $200 and 36 to 40 is $250. November would have the $200 listed in my line 15. If it's first of the next month and my birthday is today, November would have 200, December would have 250, okay? And if my renewal date is being used, the last selection here, the start date of my renewal date is going to carry through until the next renewal date, and then it would look at the next tier. So those are some things to keep in mind if you're using the age-banded or have an age-banded plan that you need to pull those amounts in. We also have the 1095 pay code selection button here, and this is, like I mentioned, at the company level. This is where you could set up specifics if you want just for this client. So, for example, on this client, they have nothing selected. So the system is going to look at the company level and see what pay codes it's going to include when it's calculating those hours for the month. If I would have something here, for example, those two codes, when I run, do a pay run or run the utility for this client, it is only going to look at these two pay codes to determine the hours per month. So that is something you can set up if you have client specifics you need. You can come out here and set those up on the 1095 pay code selection. Those are the only things that need to be set up for the client side as far as pulling anything into the 1094 or the 1095C from the client. At the employee level, there really isn't a lot to set up, but I want to look at this employee window because this is where the form's going to pull the data from. So if we go out to the employee, to the ACA setup, we have a new window down, or excuse me, a new button down here called Employee 1095C information. If you click on that, it will bring up what the employee will have for the offer of coverage for line 14, line 15, the employee share, and line 16, which is the section 4988 section. So this information on this window is going to pull into your 1095C when you print it. Now, you still also have the ability to edit the 1095C right before you print it. Like the W-2 process, it's very similar in that you run your year-end wage file, you go to edit W-2s, there's a new button out there called 1095. You click on that, and your employee in this window, or one very similar to it, will pop up, and you can go out and make your edits. And then the employee, once you go to print W-2s, there's a button there for 1095C. Once you click on that, this will, your window that you had made your edits in will print there, okay? The thing to keep in mind is at that W-2 stage, if you make an edit there, it will not populate out here. It will not go back to the employee card and populate that. So keep that in mind if you make edits at the W-2 stage. One thing you'll also notice out here, it brings in the year. This will be a historical window and table. So in 2016, you will still be able to come out here and see what this employee had for each month for 2015. And again, keeping in mind that if you made changes at the W-2, they wouldn't be out here. They would be on the 1095-C, but they wouldn't have been updated out here. So if you want those to match, you would have to come out here and update this one as well. So we're going to come back to this employee window. I first want to talk about the two ways that we're getting data into Darwin for you. We have set up the process so that if a client is marked as ALE, when you process a payroll for them, it will go through a function and it will look, as I said, like for the benefit to be out there, it will look at the hours to determine if it's part-time, full-time. It will look to see if the employee is covered or if they're in an eligible waiting period. And it will mark those appropriately on line 16. The same function occurs with our history tool. And we created a history tool simply so you could go back at this point in time now and run it and update that 1095 window for the employee from the history back to January. So that tool is located under Tools, Utilities, Payroll, and then ACA History Update. It's a very easy, simple process. You simply bring in whatever client, PEO, ASO, whatever you want to do. You bring in the client, and then you click on Run, and it will update the 1095s according to the process of what we have set up as far as the payroll. If you have made an edit to an employee's 1095 window, and you don't want that out there, you can always go back and manually edit it, but you can also come out here, you can override existing records. And what that will do is it will override the records that are out there and rerun that process again. So you can certainly do that to bring in your history from January. That's the main reason we had created this, so that you had the ability to go back and capture that. You can use this on an ongoing basis if you so desire. Excuse me. But just so you know, also, every time you run a payroll, that payroll is going to be updating your 1095-C, line 16, okay? And that is going to be, let me go back to my employee here. So these are going to be fairly consistent with what's set up on the maintenance. This line, line 16 for the 1095, is what is actually going to be updated with the pay run or the history tool. And what we have done here is we've given you a little bit of automation for this. So according to the guidelines, the first 4 codes, 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D, deal with whether an employee is employed, part-time, coverage, or eligible, or a non-assessment period. The other codes that are in the line 16 deal with your safe harbor methods, And because we didn't, I think it's multi-employer interim, because we didn't know the specifics for each of your clients or how to make that a consistent process, those will have to be manually updated on the employee card if you are using those. If you are going ahead and using the 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D, those are going to be automated through the pay run or the history utility. So to talk a little bit about those 4 codes and how they work. 2A is the code for employees, not employee. So this is going to be either for your terms or your new hires. If an employee is termed, the guidelines state you cannot use 2A in the month that they were termed. So if I terminate today, I would have 2A populate in line 16 in December. I would not have it in November. For a new hire, it will populate 2A until the month of the hire date of the employee. Now, this does not take into account the limited non-assessment period for the look-back period. If you have employees in that, you will have to manually update or edit the 1095 for those codes. The piece of the non-assessment, which is 2D, the piece of that we do work with is the eligibility piece, and I'll get to that in a minute. So, excuse me, 2A would be, if I'm looking at this employee to me was apparently not hired then until June. So if we go out to that employee, they were hired June 1st of this year. So they had the 2A all the way through June, and then they were hired, so then they got either the 2B or 2C, depending on what they are. The 2B code is the part-time code, okay? So anyone that has under the 130 would be the 2B. Now, keep in mind that the guidelines state that 2C, which is the code for an employee enrolled in coverage, takes precedent over the other codes. So if you have a part-time employee, but they do have coverage, maybe it's a client that does offer coverage to part-time employees. If that's the case, they will come up as a 2C on that 1095 in line 16 for that month, okay? 2C is your enrolled in coverage. So any employees that you have in enrolled in coverage would have the 2C available to them and showing up on line 16. 2D is the one where we do take and we do address the eligibility wait period for employees. And to show you that, let me go out to an employee. And if I go to this particular employee's benefit, I have this employee marked at the company level for the HL1 benefit code as an ACA benefit, okay? So when I go out to the employee's ACA setup, or 1095 setup, excuse me, I will see that this employee didn't start until September. In October and November, he was eligible or in a wait period, and 2C, he was enrolled in December. So if I go back to look at this employee's card, you will see that I put an effective date on this of 12/1. And that's why the system is putting it in the waiting period for October and November on his 1095 card or window. So October, November, he's in the waiting period. He started in October, but he was in a wait period there. And then 2C is the payroll I ran in December, where he had the coverage and was out of the wait period. So that's a little bit about those 4 codes that we have set up and how they work. And like I said, those automatically occur when you process the payroll or when you use the history report. If you're using the 1E or any of the codes after that, those you will have to manually come out and set up on the employee card, because we have no way of pulling that in. And if there are changes with it, because clients can have a variety, you can have a variety of different ways you're handling that for your client. So our employee's done. We ran the utility for this client. We went ahead, we made edits if we had any edits that we needed to make. And it's time to run the W-2 or the 1095C and the 1094. You do have to run a year-end wage file. I'm not going to do that on my test data because it's so big and it'll take a while. But you do have to run your year-end wage file. Once you run your year-end wage file, it is exactly the same process as what you do for W-2s. You can go out, you click on Edit W-2s. There's a button for the 1095. It looks exactly like the Employee 1095 window, and you can make any edits out there that you need to. Then you can go to Print, and you can print the 1095s from there, just like you would for W-2s. I do have an example that I printed off earlier, just to walk through and talk through this actual form with you. The 1094C, basically you're going to have the client information up here. One thing you will notice, the name of the person to contact and the contact telephone number are not populating. We do have a couple of little tweaks we're still going to be making to these forms, that being one of them. And we will have a DLL update. It won't be an actual Darwin update, but it will be an update for the DLL folder that these forms are in, that we'll make those changes and we'll get that to you here in the next week or two or a couple of weeks. So that is one thing. Down here you will see that it does show your total number of forms that you have for your 1095 to go with this 1094. You'll also see, is this an ALE member of an aggregated group? If it is, and you have that set up and they're part of that setup at the company level, then this would be marked as yes. Your certification of eligibility pulls in from what you have set up in on your client setup for that client. And then Part 3. Part 3 is a little bit more to it for the 1094C. Column A, which is the minimum essential coverage, is going to be, it's actually a calculation where it looks at the number of full-time employees for that month and the number of full-time employees covered for that month. And if you are at 95% or more, it will, or if at least 95%, are covered, it will mark yes here. If not, you will have a no marked here. The full-time employee count and the total employee count, originally the guidelines stated you could use the first of the month or the last of the month for this, as long as you were consistent. They really didn't care. But they have since come out and said, since there are other taxing report or tax reporting that uses the 12th of the month, you can now use the 12th of the month. We are using the 12th of the month for the full-time employee count and the total employee count. One thing to note, if you have, I believe it's D marked for your certification of eligibility, you do not need to have column B populate, so that will not populate if you have D checked. Aggregated group indicator, if this is for an aggregated group, it will be marked for each of the months that it was part of that aggregated group. And then the section 4980H depends on what you have marked up here. I believe if you have marked B and C, those are the two that bring in a code A or code B, I believe, in the section E on part 3. And the last section, which is part 4, just lists the member of the aggregated group. If this form is for an aggregated group, it will list out each of the members and the EIN for them. So that's basically the 1094C. The 1095, as we kind of looked at previously, is simply your employee demographic information, your client information, and then you get into line 14, 15, and 16, since we are not filling out part 3. One thing to note, and this is also one thing we're looking at, one of those tweaks that we're doing, the plan start month. This was not on the original draft of the 1095, but it was on the final. The plan start month is a 2-digit number. The guidelines have stated this is not mandatory or required for the year 2015. It will be for 2016. So just a note to you that if you run one and there's not a plan start month, there doesn't have to be one out there, but we are looking at getting that in, that update that we have. So that's the 1095C. Very much this piece will be the piece that figures or calculates out and populates from your 1095 window. So, okay, time-wise, we're going to have to move on here. I think everything pretty much is covered. There's a lot of data that goes into these 1094s and 1095Cs. We've tried to capture as much of that automatically as we can. As I said, that 1095 window, you can always, at any time, go out and edit that. If something comes through and it's changed, you don't want that, you can go out and edit that. You can do that ahead of time. Because the window, this window at the employee for the 1095, here is what is exactly going to copy over to the window at the edit W-2s. So you can edit it here ahead of time and have that copy over to there, or you can wait and you can make your edits at your end. That's your call on how you want to handle that. But you can always go out there and edit. So, and like I said, if you have any questions on any of this, make sure you do send an email to product management and we'll get answers for you on that. Okay, I've got to move on now to SUTA effective date. Excuse me. So we get that covered as well. Another feature in 1220 that we have is going to be the SUTA effective date. Previously in Darwin, you could not enter the new rates or the new limits for SUTA because there was no way to hold those, so you had to wait until they actually occurred to get those put in. We have since added for 1220, we have added this window now where you can add a SUTA effective date. You can do this at the company level, or you can do this at the client level. And we'll go through a couple of them just to show you if one is set up at both and how all that works. So when you're getting these SUTA effective notices for states now, or the ones that have come out in the last couple of weeks, you can go out and you can put those liability rates and those wage limits in, and they will be out there. And so if you put an effective date of 1/1, you can put that rate out there now, and the first check date that you run after 1/1 will take into account the new rate, if there's a new liability rate, or the new limit. So if you go out, to show you that, if you go out to the company level, and go to your unemployment tax window, you will see a new button out here called Effective SUTA, okay? If you click on that, this will bring up, when you first go out here, it will be completely blank. We did not bring over what the current is or anything like that. This window would be blank. You simply click the Add button, and then you can go in and you can add the start date, the end date, the new liability rate, the wage limit, the date you received it, and then the status is going to show as pending. Now, if I leave this out here and go through all of 2015, next year at this time, I will come out here, and this will be an in-use status because I'm currently using it, but I can go out and add my new rate for 2017, and it will show that until that goes into effect. Once that new rate goes into once the new effective dates go into play, this becomes an historical status. So you have pending for those that are waiting yet to come, you have in use for the ones you're currently using, and then you have historical for any that have been used. So, 5-6 years from now, you could have 6 lines out there, and you're going to have 4 of them probably be your historical, 1 in use, and then 1 pending. So to roll them down, now this is at the company level, so you can go to the client level and set it up, like I said, or you can, if you have it set up here, you can roll it down. So if you want to roll this down, what it's going to do is basically put it in an effective SUTA window, just like this, on the client. And we'll go and look at the client after I roll this down. First, I think what we'll do, we'll actually go out and look at the client. So if I go out, I do see this. If I go to the effective SUTA, I have nothing out here on the client. I've not set up anything on the client. I have no effective SUTA date for them whatsoever. So when I go back to the company level and select that and go to roll down, I will get a list of any client that has this state assigned as a SUTA state. I can then go out and pick and choose. If I have an ASO client that I don't want to roll down to, or if I have a PEO client for that matter that I don't want to roll down to, I don't have to. I just wouldn't select them in this window. But if I do want to roll it down, I will select it, and then I'll click OK. That brings up this window, which is about conflicting records. And conflicting records are when the client set up and the company set up have the same state, same date range, but they have different amounts. And I'll show you an example of that after we get through with this one that we're working on now. So for this one, generally the first thing I'm going to do with this window is I'm going to run the report only. I'm not going to update. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to run the report. The report here says I have 1 client which would have received the roll down, which is JBM. Okay? If there were conflicting records, and we'll see this in a minute, it would show that. So this, if I ran it, I'm good to go. I can do the roll down. So then I'm going to go back out here, click my JBM, and I'm going to overwrite the existing rate and limit data. And it's going to tell me that 1 client received the roll down, which was JBM. So I'm at 2.65 and 7,500. So when I go out to JBM, and go to that effective SUTA, it's 2.65 and 7,500. So now when 1/1 rolls around, this client, employees in this state, they would start the SUTA liability at this rate. We do not do anything with the billing rate for the SUTA because that's something that's going to vary for you client by client. So all we're doing with the effective SUTA is the liability rate and the wage limit. The other piece of this that I wanted to show you is if I go to a client that has, or a state that has a conflicting record. So I'm going to go out to my unemployment tax again. And we're going to see that as the state of Texas. In the state of Texas, we do have an effective SUTA set up for 2% at $9,500 for the limit. And that's at the company level. If I go to the client level, and go to the effective date, I have something different set up at the client level. Now this may be, maybe in October, they sent something out saying, okay, it was liability rate is 3%. So we set it up at the client level thinking, oh, we've got it set up. Now they're coming back and they're saying, no, wait, it's 2.55 or whatever the case may be. So if I would go out to the company level and set that up and try to roll it down, we'll show you what it will do to alert us that there's something already set up at the client level. So if I go out to the SUTA and go to roll down, and I'm going to just select that one client, and I'm going to run the report, it tells me client JBM had a matching time frame but not matching rate limit data. So when I go to do this roll down, if I have any clients that are going to be different for the liability or the limit, they're going to come up here. So this gives me an opportunity to go out and investigate that before I actually roll it down. So let's say I found out, okay, yep, that is the case. It got marked somehow inadvertently by someone, or that got put out there. I need to override it. So then I can simply go forward with my roll down, and I can click on the override existing rate and say okay. It's going to tell me that the matching time frame was updated, and it updated the rate limit, which was 3% at $9,500. And you can print this into report form if you'd like as well. So if I go back out to that client, and go to their SUTA for Texas and go to the effective rate, you can see that it's now brought down to the 2% $9,500 instead of the 3% that it originally was. So that's another feature of it. The report is nice because it will show you what's going to get rolled down. And then you have the opportunity, if there are those conflicting records where it maybe got set up with something different at the client versus the company level, you can see those conflicting records and then decide how you want to handle them, and then proceed with your roll down if you want to just override that and roll that down. The one thing you will also notice with this particular window now for SUTA, it says from client level. It will tell you where this rate came from. If it comes from the client level effective rate and nothing at the company level, but you're pulling it in at the client level, it will say from client level. If it is something you're rolling down from the company level, once this window gets updated, it will say from company level. So that at least gives you another avenue to look at, you know, where did this rate come from? If you go out there and you look at the company and you see on the client it's something different, this may spark you to go look at what was set up for an effective date on that effective SUTA window at the client level, because it may come from that level and not the company level. So that's just something to notice. You will notice that is new on this window as well. This window will get updated once you get past that effective date. So once you hit 1/1/2016, this window will update out here. You will still see that line out here in your effective. This will still be here. It will just now say in use, and then this will be updated to match this. So that's it pretty much for the SUTA effective date. It's a nice feature, I think, especially this time of year when it seems like every other day there's something about a state increase, remaining the same, whatever the case may be. This is a nice place to go out, or a nice ability to go out and put it in Darwin so you don't have to worry about it until after the first of the year. So the only other thing that I did want to mention, where are we at? Okay, 2 minutes. The only other thing I did want to mention that's in 1220 is we did do some work with the payroll reconcile and the speed of that process when you run it. I know sometimes with larger clients, and depending on what they all have processing in those pay runs, that can be a long task, especially this time of year, it seems like. So they did go through and they did find a way to increase that speed of that process. So that is also available in 1220. So you may want to look at the payroll reconcile, or when you run the payroll reconcile, just make a note of that. That also has been updated. So I've got a minute 2, so we're going to go ahead. I know everybody's got busy days and have things they need to get back to. Again, if you have any questions on SUTA effective or ACA setup for 1094, 1095s, please feel free to email that product management at thinkwareinc.com, and we will get answers back to you. I appreciate everyone's time. I know it's extremely valuable. Documentation is available out on the website under the release documents. So you can go out there. I think we have, they have documentation on the go-to button, the SUTA effective, and the 1094 and 1095C. So you can go out there and find that as well. So again, thank you everyone for your time today. I appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.